Well, hello Lionhearts, it's your old pal Jordan the Lion. We are entering Abilene, Kansas, and today we are going to the boyhood home and presidential library of one of the greatest presidents in United States history, Dwight D. Eisenhower. I like Ike. Days with Jordan the Lion begins now. Very patriotic part of Kansas here. We're starting out here. We just purchased the tickets in the gift shop and we're going to see the boyhood home and then move along to his gravesite, and then tomorrow you guys will get to see his presidential library. You can get replica old newspaper announcements. Here we have a grenade mug and a bullet, the shell casing that you can put on your hat, and a bobblehead. Now this should be an interesting day because Dwight D. Eisenhower was not only a great president, but he was also a great general who is credited with making the decision to storm the beaches at Normandy, which ended, eventually would lead to the end of World War II. When he was done being a general, believe it or not, both parties, the Republicans and Democrats, both wanted him to run on their presidential ticket. He ended up going to the Republican National Convention, and when they thought Robert Taft was just a shoo-in, he was, everybody, he even had 3 extra votes. Dwight D. Eisenhower came in and won that, and then won the presidency and went on to have a great presidency. What I always remember him from in school was the warning of the industrial military complex. And so we're gonna check out the home that he lived in. He was actually born in Denison, Texas, but his father moved the family back up here when he was 1, and they lived in this house. And it's a really nice looking house, but they said he was not wealthy. They were actually a poor family, and that this, by those standards, was not a great house. So let's go take a look at the boyhood home of Dwight D. Eisenhower. There it is. That's the house that Dwight D. Eisenhower grew up in. He and all of his brothers, and they all came out to be very upstanding young men. And one of the cool things about Dwight D. Eisenhower is that he would go on throughout his entire career and mention that he was proudest to be from Abilene, Kansas. There's a really great picture of when all the boys are grown up and the family are all here, and Dwight's sitting right there on those steps. Now if you come to the Eisenhower Presidential Library, they have recently, and I mean so recent, they told me literally it's not even, well actually today it is a week old that they opened the Eisenhower Museum, and you can pay an extra $5. They have a museum, they have Dwight's statue here, they have his boyhood home here, they have his final resting place here, and they have the museum and presidential library are separate buildings. So for an extra $5 you can come check out his boyhood home and take a full tour, which is about what we're going to do here in a few seconds. So this is interesting. I was just told that a lot of the houses in the South have a blue like kind of ceiling out here on the porch, and that's to ward off evil spirits is what I was told. Interesting. I'd never heard that before. Here we go. Well, we're inside the house, and they said that he lived here from the age of 8 to 20. The original house that he was living in was just much too small for the family. They ended up having 6 boys, so they couldn't have the small house. This was the fancy living room in here. Now they said this doorway would have originally been the doorway to outside, and that they added this room on later so that the boys could all have their space upstairs. Instead of all 5, they actually had 6 boys, but 1 died when he was young. They decided to make Dwight and his older brother, who he always fought with, live in the same room. And this would have been the parents' room. They got twin beds for comfort eventually. There's her sewing machine, and that's Dwight's mom, and they said she was the last one to live in this house. Now they show that upstairs, this is what the upstairs looks like since we can't go up there. That room number 1 is the one that Dwight and his brother would have shared. And then his other 2 brothers would have shared this room. And then the 3rd room was for the oldest of all of the brothers. Since he was the oldest, he got his own room. And they said that the entirety of that room that the oldest got would have been right here. Now they said since all the brothers were birthed in the home, there's no official birth certificate, so in the Bible is the only record they have of them being born. This would have been her, Mrs. Eisenhower's special visitors room, you know, entertaining guests. They said they would have very rarely ever used this room because they would have all done Bible study in that room over there in the evening, and that would have been the family room. So let's go look over there in the family room. Now this is the family room. They said that their mother was an accomplished piano player and used part of her inheritance to have a custom piano built, and that she would play that at night, and then all the boys would sit in here on the floor and do Bible study. Take a look at that. So the original house, before they did any additions, would have basically just been this room, the front room that we were in, and then the upstairs. And this leads into the kitchen that they added on in 1901.
In 1932, that commemorate the 200th anniversary of the birth of George Washington.
Those plates.
And one last item I'd like to share with you folks. Up here in the corner, there's a double picture of the family. 1902 on the left, 1926 on the right. I used the first picture to line up the boys again in the same exact order for the second. Dwight's to the far left in each picture. Folks, what's very special about this family is a little bit to understand the beginnings of this family. When you go over to the museum, in the very first gallery, there's a big long table that has 6 placemats that talk about the careers of these 6 boys, careers that were never supposed to happen, because this town had made it clear to them all through their childhood that they were never going to amount to anything because they were living on the wrong side of the tracks. A concept that didn't work too well with these boys. This family is an exceptional, incredible family story.
And those are the photos he was referencing, where Dwight's all the way on the far left. In both photos.
We'll go back before that.
You can see him right up there.
This is a family that grew up before 1915.
And these are the George Washington commemorative plates he was talking about. And they said that their mother would make dough in this, and she would make 9 loaves of bread every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to feed the family. And then there's the family dinner table. So in the kitchen, they said this was the storm cellar down here in this doorway, and that the horn is where their dad would hang his hat. And so if the boys were out playing, they would come in, and if they saw his hat hanging up there, they knew it was time to end playing for the day and it was time to come in. There's their bathroom, you can see.
If Dad's hat was on the horn, they just missed dinner. You weren't allowed to come to the dinner table if the dinner was already served. So they'd be constantly checking for the hat. See whether they'd stayed out too late.
And then this is a view into the parlor room where the boys would have done their Bible study and Mom would have played the piano. And that looks into the fancy room that we looked in when we came in here. And that's the door they would have left through. That door. Sorry, they were kind of rushing us through this. Well, it's a really interesting experience. It's unfortunate that we couldn't go up to the top floor where their bedrooms were, but it's pretty tight and they have a lot of people taking the tour. Unfortunately, they really rush you through, and unfortunately we had a kid that just would not stop talking through the whole tour, so it was not the greatest tour in the world, but we did get to find out a lot about the family, that literally they were on the wrong side of the tracks. And if you look over here, you can see the train tracks and the train over there right now. Now, as I mentioned inside, his original house, the house that they moved to and he would have lived in from the time he was 1 to 8, was just too small for the expanding family, and so they ended up moving to this house, and this is the house that he always considered home from 8 to 20. And they said that his father died 4 years before his mother, and his mother was the last resident of this house, I believe in 1947. And they said they closed it up, but because Dwight D. Eisenhower was a war hero, they were already deciding to make museums in honor of war heroes. And so they had already started the process of putting this in place, and after his mother passed, the house had been closed up with everything that you just saw being original. That was all her stuff. They closed the house up for 9 months, and then they opened it up and made it available for people to come see. And then of course Dwight D. Eisenhower was president, and this became the grounds of the Presidential Library. Now what's cool is they said that their mother was an avid gardener, and that's why she loved this property so much, because along with this house, they got 2.5 acres next to it that I'll show you what's there now, and that was her garden area. And they actually have trains on both sides of the tracks. On both sides of the house. They had trains over here, and then they also had a train running over there. So from the front of the house, as I mentioned, they told us that the family got the house, I believe, in 1896. And then in 1900, they started doing additions. First being this room that would be the mother and father's room. And then they also had a room behind there that was for David, which was Dwight D. Eisenhower's father. David's father would come here and live out his final days as well. So there you can see the old Wizard of Oz style underground shelter, and the doorway, they said, that we showed you going into their bedroom that would have went into here, that originally was the doorway that went out here, which was all of their orchards. And so she would can many vegetables from what was grown here. Now looking out, you can see that there is a statue of Dwight D. Eisenhower in the dead center, so let's go take a look at that. So now as we walk out towards the statue, on this side is the Presidential Library, and that's originally where a bulk of the museum and all the artifacts and everything that you would come to visit would have been. However, they said they just opened the museum, which is now kind of very similar to the same building right on the other side, and that's where everything is now, and that was opened a week ago today. Right where she would have grown veggies. Like I said, come back tomorrow and you'll get to check out the museum and all that tomorrow. They just had so much on the grounds here. I just wanted to keep today's video just basically the boyhood home and his final resting place. And really, Dwight D. Eisenhower is known for a whole lot more than you might even think. I mean, he was responsible for putting into motion the end of the Korean conflict. He was the one that signed into or pushed through the civil rights. He was the one that got African Americans able to vote. Look at the presidential seal here. Then it says Champion of Peace, which he definitely was. That was what the whole military-industrial complex warning was. It was, hey, don't forget that building guns and taking away the hopes of the youth isn't the way we're supposed to live. It's a necessary evil, but we don't want to get wrapped up in that being everything and that being a business. Let's see if we can't get up there and get a good look at his face. Highly respected president and war hero, of course. It says Dwight David Eisenhower, 34th President of the United States, January 20th, 1953, January 20th, 1961. And here it says, the quest for peace is the statesman's most exacting duty. Practical progress to lasting peace is his fondest hope. And they told us inside that it wasn't until 1941 that Dwight D. Eisenhower's parents had a radio in that house, and that was because their sons wanted them to be able to know what was going on around the world, and that way their parents actually got to hear Dwight give a speech from, I forget how many thousands of miles away he was at the time. And then this is also a great reminder, he was not only the general of World War II, but he was the Supreme Allied Commander for Europe, for all of Europe during that, and he was also the head of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. So now let's walk over and see his final resting place. They have a meditation garden over there where Dwight, his wife Mamie, and their first son Dowd is buried. Here you can see a memorial to the Battle of the Bulge and Kansas chapter. Lest we forget their generation, honoring the men and women who served, but let us be glad that such heroes have lived and mourn those who gave the ultimate sacrifice. And they said Dwight was no stranger to Abilene. He came back very often in his life. Obviously he had to come visit his parents. But after the war, when he returned, they threw a gigantic parade down the center of town in his honor. There you can see the Abilene Smoky Valley train. Now I think Dwight D. Eisenhower might be the only president I can think of that I haven't heard somebody trash in my lifetime. I've heard almost every other, well, other than, you know, you don't often get into a conversation about Rutherford B. Hayes or Benjamin Harrison, but anybody that was alive, that was a president during the time that anyone that discusses politics has been, I've never heard anybody ever say anything negative about Dwight D. Eisenhower. But everybody else I have. Go figure that, people would have an opinion on politics. Who knew? Wow. This is a beautiful fountain here to walk into. Oh man, it does look refreshing though, doesn't it? It is pretty hot out here in Kansas. All right. Wow. Well, here they are. Right directly below us is Dwight D. Eisenhower. You can see the plaque right here. And then next to him is his son, Dowd Dwight Eisenhower. And there's Mamie Eisenhower, Mamie Dowd Eisenhower. Now up here on the walls you can see there are a few things written in memorial, and it says, the real fire within the builders of America was faith. Faith in a provident God whose hand supported and guided them. Faith in themselves as the children of God. Faith in their country and its principles that proclaim man's right to freedom and justice. His Abilene and Homecoming, 1952. And then over here we see one that says, our humility must always be the portion of any man who receives a claim earned in blood of his followers and sacrifices of his friends. That was given in London. And here it says, every gun made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies, in the final sense, a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and not clothed. This is not a way of life at all. Under the cloud of threatening war, it is humanity hanging from a cross of iron. Let's go take a look at the chapel side on the other side of here. Kind of surprised his parents aren't buried here on the grounds as well. Well, my friends, I hope you enjoyed getting to see Dwight D. Eisenhower's final resting place and his boyhood home. We're gonna call it a day. I want to thank Martha and Brenda and Larry Carlson for becoming my newest Patreons. Come back and see me tomorrow when we will explore the Presidential Library and Museum of Dwight D. Eisenhower. Have a great night and goodbye.